Can Enugu coal revival deliver reliable power? This morning, we turn our spotlight to Enugu, Nigeria's historic coal city, where a century-old resource is being reimagined as the future of power in the southeast. After years of dormancy, Enugu's coal reserves are back in play. Governor Peter Mbah has set an ambitious target, 1,000 megawatts of electricity from coal powered by the state's premium low-sulfur deposits and new clean coal technology. Already, a 350-megawatt plant is coming up in Oji River, set to serve Enugu, Anambra, and Ebonyi. In Nsukka, Nigeria's first 30-megawatt clean coal-to-power plant is on the way, backed by US investors, and designed to light up both the national grid and the University of Nigeria campus. With over 300 million tons of reserves and possibly more, Enugu is positioning itself as a baseload power hub. 5 coal blocks are open for bidding, and the state has even launched Nigeria's first subnational electricity bond market to attract serious investors. But it's not just about megawatts. It's about jobs, about industrial growth, about powering factories, schools, and homes without relying solely on gas from the Niger Delta. Of course, challenges remain, from the environmental concerns to power purchase agreement and the push towards net zero by 2060. So the question is, can Enugu's coal revival deliver reliable power and drive a $30 billion economy for the state without compromising Nigeria's climate goals? I am Cherry Ojukwu. This is the Eastern Business Report. My guest is Afia TV's Economic and Business Correspondent, Mr. Obanya.
Obanya.
Oh, it's nice to meet you, sir.
Thank
Welcome.
you. It's a lot of people struggle with the Obanya.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
Thank you for correcting.
I guess it's dialectal, so people. Yes. Well, good to be here.
Okay. So, question is first: how will Enugu State balance its 1,000 megawatt coal power ambition with Nigeria's net zero emission pledge for 2060?
I think, first of all developing nations need to jettison, ignore, and, without trying to sound too crass about it, get the dustbin and dump all these climate agendas. There is no way you're going to become an advanced nation without proper industrialization. And the secret to industrialization is to have cheap energy to generate power on a large scale, affordable energy that's accessible on a large scale. That's the only way you're going to get, to ramp up industrialization. So we've not seen any evidence, and don't forget what the so-called academics will tell you. We're yet to see the evidence of climate change. You can check scientifically water levels for over 100 plus years. They've not risen. And the goalposts keep shifting from, ice age will get cold, to the ozone layer will deplete, to greenhouse gases will get trapped, to, we keep getting a goalpost shifting. If I'm old enough to remember when it was acid rain that we were afraid of. So, we need to keep aside, if you check, the countries ramping up their industrialization like China and India are not paying attention to these climate goals, but they are financially supporting it so people don't look in their direction. They're using money to offset. They don't care. I always say people who fly a private jet each for a climate conference cannot be serious about climate, because the amount of, so-called toxic material generated by private jets is you and I might not use that in our lifetime driving a car. So let us just, and I'm talking about the private jet emissions for one climate event. So let us not get too carried away. Now, coming back to Enugu, it's long overdue, because if Enugu wants to really ramp up industrialization, ramp up manufacturing, ramp up large-scale hospitality, tourism, you're going to need heavy infrastructure and, heavy machinery, and all these things require a heavy supply of electricity. Enugu has coal. The proven deposits is somewhere around, 54 million metric tons. But the estimated, because every time you try to dig a well or do a road or dig a gutter, coal pops up. So there's estimated that in the greater Enugu area, there's anything from 300 million to 1 billion metric tons of coal under Enugu, so nobody knows for sure. What we do know is that Enugu has a lot of coal. The OG station, the heavy work in terms of structural infrastructure is on ground. What it needs is modernization and re-equipping, and you have a substation ready to go. I think that Enugu should not be looking at any source of power except coal, because it's in abundance here. It will also open up the mining industry, because even somebody that is, mining coal already has the energy industry, as an off-taker. You are a first customer. You have already mitigated their risk for the coal they are mining. They're not just thinking of exports. You are right there, And when people say, oh, coal, is it harmful? Let's come back to the whole issue of climate. Alternative energy, wind, solar, these things are not, they are not very, very helpful when it comes to industrialization. And this comes down to energy. You see, when you're doing heavy energy, whether you're, doing fabrication, heavy manufacturing, heavy processing of anything from palm oil to getting ethanol, or anything from sugar, from cassava chips, or, sugar cane, you need to have power. And now we have changed. We're talking about power quantity of kilowatts. We're talking of energy intensity. So we're talking kilojoules, not kilowatts. So while your solar panels can give you kilowatts, the intensity of energy you get will come from boiling water. As crazy as that sounds. Because no matter how they want to tell you the different sources of producing energy, the most effective ways of energy is boiling water, steam turbine. And it's how you get your steam that is the issue. Whether you are, using gas, pumping gas, what are you doing? You're going to burn the gas, boil water at high pressure. The steam will push a turbine. And, I don't know how many people were physics students, but basically it turns the fan. The fan is on a rod. The rod has magnets on it. It's rotating inside copper wire loops. You generate electricity, from your energy source to mechanical to electrical energy. Simple energy conversion. That's the basic way these turbines work. So if you're using coal, it's the same thing. You pulverize the coal. After pulverizing it, you burn your coal ash, it burns low, it gives you that very high pressure steam, turn your turbine, same results. Even when you talk about nuclear power, what are you doing? Say nuclear fission, bombarding heavy, yes, you're bombarding heavy items like uranium, but what are you doing? It's nuclear fission. All you are doing is that the reaction of bombarding it with smaller elements creates heat. And it's that heat that boils water. So you're boiling water at the end of the day. Everything's just to boil water. The steam pushes a turbine, it cools again, and use the water, repeat the cycle. So we should be very honest about what we want to do, and we should not let, Europeans, Western Europeans convince us otherwise. We have the raw material and we have the market here. Let us have our complete ecosystem without people by telling us what we can and we cannot do, forcing us to depend. The China that is manufacturing millions of solar panels and inverters every day is heavily using coal. So they shouldn't be forcing us to use things we don't manufacture. If we have coal and we have the market, can we just use our coal and boil our water and generate our electricity? I'm happy Enugu is going in this direction, because what it means is that Enugu will become an exporter of power. I did see something that worried me though, which is that Nsukka wants to be putting power on the national grid. I was just talking with a people from EADC today. Our national grid, the TCN, everything, they should pack it up and sell to iron condemned. Look, a lot of it is moribund. It's outdated. It's not useful to you and I. The amount of times the national grid collapses. If the Gencos are complaining, they're saying it's gas supply. If the Discos are complaining, they're saying they're not getting any supply from the Gencos. What is the TCN's problem? The most frequent problem in power, grid has collapsed. What is the grid collapsing? It's the outdated, archaic equipment, with years of neglect, years of corruption under NEPA, under PHCN. A lot of billionaires were made at the expense of fake or substandard rural electrification projects. So we need to pack up. It's not a joke. Pack up that whole thing. Let's have a global iron condemn bid and get rid of it. Every state, bring your Genco to the state, have your disco in the state, build your small infrastructure, your network, and push electricity in your state. And any excess, you can start refurbishing regional grids now. that any excess power from states can be thrown to a regional grid that is solely for the purpose of subsidized electricity to rural areas by the government. That's fine strategic thinking. But this whole national grid charade that we do, let's stop it. If the national grid was a human being, it would be a dwarf with leprosy that is blind and is suffering from a terminal illness. So there's no point trying to, invest money. It's like you're trying to invest money in that person for them to compete in a beauty pageant. That's what we're trying to do with our national grid.
Okay, so given the global shift away from coal, what long-term viability should studies have been done to ensure that these plants don't, become obsolete in 10 to 15 years?
Coal is not going anywhere. We have clean coal technology. And like I said, but what people understand is that even when you pulverize and you burn the coal, the water you're boiling, that steam gets there. After it turns the turbines, it goes straight into a condenser and becomes water again. Mm-hmm. So it says the water is not wasted. Two, nuclear power is even more dangerous than coal in the sense that you're talking of coal, you're talking of gas. People cook with coal. Coal is mostly carbon. You're talking of nuclear reactors that any mistake there is a complete meltdown and it's radioactive material getting exposed. Look how long Chernobyl was abandoned in Ukraine because of the Chernobyl plant's meltdown. It's a serious issue. And because it's the same material for a nuclear bomb and you're doing nuclear fission, you're bombarding something, there's also the possibility of an explosion. So, and you have to keep the cooling rods. You're always worried. When you're dealing with coal, imagine it's just you pound coal, put water, boil the water, and you're using the steam. The safety is miles ahead of nuclear and miles ahead of gas, both of which are very, very, very volatile. And, the risk is very high. The risk of major accidents with coal is much, much lower. Two, the ready availability of the raw material is everywhere. When you say viable, what will make it non-viable? Is it the availability of the raw material? It is going to be there. Is it the fact that new, cheaper technologies will come out? Let me tell you, with all the solar, with all the wind, with all the everything they are doing, right? The cheapest source of power is still mass-generated public power. And anybody doing mass-generated public power with a resource right under their feet is not going to have any problem of, all the efficiency will happen at the disco end and how to maybe amplify the effect of the burning of the coal to hit the water. You can only bring improvements. You can't make it obsolete.
So does Enugu's current transmission infrastructure have the capacity to evacuate 1,000 megawatts of power to Enugu, Anambra, and Ebonyi without major upgrades?
No, it's not possible. But the good thing is that you're not going to need a national grid. You're dealing with states. And a lot of the responsibility, it's separated. You have your GENCO, you have your DISCO. So the DISCO's job is last mile reticulation of power, which is from them to the meters in your house. The GENCO's job is to get power from the generating company to the DISCO. So your OG station is a GENCO. Their job is to generate the power. You bring the code, they generate, and they send to the distribution companies. Their job is now to send to different houses. Houses have meters. Houses have wires. Houses have poles. The infrastructure is there. Any new infrastructure you're building as a DISCO is for the area you're supplying. And anything you're doing as a GENCO is from you to the DISCOs you are working with. So it's one of investment, and after that is maintenance. It's one of heavy capital investment, then operational maintenance. So it's not on ground, but it's not hard to, get everything on steam very quickly, because right now, if 10 factories show up in Ezago and you are a DISCO, you connect to 10 factories. 10 factories if I'm an investor and 10 factories pop up in Ezago, I'm going to site there, because by the time those 10 factories, those are heavy off-takers, and you're going to have, factory workers living around there, and then the people who supply them raw materials, petrol stations will have to come, maybe banks will have to come, the market will have to come, or shopping mall, barbers will have to come, tailors will have to come. All these people will need to stay in houses. As a Genco, as a disco, I'm happy to be there. Another 10 pop up at Udi, another 10 pop up, and for what's happening, there are 6 discos in Enugu. You just need one Genco for all of them. Just one. Sit down in OG, pump. Then, the next disco pops up in Oka. Oka is bordering with Enugu State, and it's not far from Oji River. So from you to that disco. And that disco at Oka, because if you're placed near the Enugu-Oka border, you turn left, you're going to Orumba South, straight is to Oka. You don't go too far. You are in Dunu Kofia. Before you just still along that same axis, you are in Njikoka. So the linkage to get to last mile customers is not hard at all. Airborne is literally a straight road all the way down to Abakaliki, and everything comes off it. And by extension, if at the end of Abakaliki you put another disco there, you can start supplying down to Ogoja. So the possibilities are endless. I don't think it's hard. It's not something that will be. It's just to have the ready industrial off-takers, that will make the first. Because residential consumption is not real. It's not real money. I'll tell you for free. A TV station like Afia, I doubt there's anybody working in this place that spends on, personal power at home, spends more than 20, 30,000 in their house. Some people spend 2,000, some people spend 5,000, depending on the size of your house. Afia here will spend a minimum of 500,000 to $1 million. So one Afia alone is so if you have 10 Afias, that's what a disco wants to see. Then all the other residential people, because if you think of it, the same cost of getting wire and meter to one house is the same cost of getting wire and meter to Afia, but look at the return on investment. That's why, power providers always look for commercial and industrial off-takers first. That's what makes it commercially viable to get into an area. Then the next viable thing is large-scale residential projects and markets before you start coming to housing estates.
Wow, that's very insightful. So what measures are being taken to, protect host communities from health hazards associated with coal mining and combustion?
Okay, so there are 2 parts of it. One, and I know we knock the federal government a lot, but I'll give them credit for this one. They've started moving aspects of solid mineral extraction from the exclusive list. So now state governments can now get involved, in it. So things like bodies to handle issues as communities there. You're not going to Abuja again to look for a minister. The same thing. Any agency involved with, moving things in and out, that local level now, even if you're coming to invest, you're going to deal with Enugu'S State Investment Development Agency, consumer protection. A lot of things in this administration have been localized. The reason why we even have, the state government getting involved now is that the federal government too has, deregulated power. So at a states now, credit to them, they were the first to get their own electricity regulatory, commission. So everything is now localized. So the protection of people is much closer, to home. People can address those issues. So you now cannot have a sugar daddy in Abuja that can protect you from any, mishap you do in a community. And you in the state that the people are going to come and meet, you're not hiding somewhere in, a rented mansion in Asokoro. You're right here in Enugu. Your office is right here in GRA. We can find you. So I think that that deregulation and that decentralization is going to help a lot with regards to protecting the rights of people.
Okay. So how will the 30 megawatt Nsukka clean coal plants demonstrate scalability and reliability before larger plants are committed to?
So I think putting one there is very important, and people might say, who is the off-taker? The thing is that sometimes you have to build the industries with it. The University of Nigeria in Nsukka is there. And usually in university towns, you're meant to have research agencies and other things around there because the greatest resource they need, which is human capacity, is in the university right there, from the lecturers who can be researchers to the graduate assistants they will bring and all that. Another thing is that, putting in Nsukka, you are talking about a whole senatorial district and a linkage to Benue and Kogi states as well, because by the time you get Ogbolafor, you're moving up north, you're getting Enugu'S, all those places, you're going up north. And just beyond Nsukka, Adani, heavy rice, potential for rice plantations, you're moving towards, and part of Enugu that is in the, Anambra River Basin where there's gas, there's oil. So there are industries that can come into all those areas. Even large-scale rice milling, bagging, all those things have to come there. The Adada Dam is there. So it's another source of, even though it's for irrigation right now, but you have a river that is dammed already. If you see the dam, it doesn't have the, heavy damming that you need for. But if you bring an Nsukka clean coal plant there, the options of what you can do, being that you have a reliable source from the river to the farms, you can now bring agricultural processing right there to the farmlands. You don't take it far away. So anything you're planning, Nsukka, two things we do in Nsukka for. One, Nsukka pepper, very popular. And then there's, like I mentioned, the Adani rice. And then by the time you start moving to Ehamufu and issues, all those places, you start seeing a lot of different agricultural produce. I know some people in this office that actually go to Ehamufu for what I call fufu tourism, akpu tourism. Believe it or not, some people take their food very seriously. And there's a quality of food you get in places where there's farmland. So increasing the value chain from just farming to packaging, processing, labeling, to get higher value products from those areas and bring more industry there. That's what putting a power plant in Nsukka means. It's massive urbanization, massive gentrification, massive industrialization, and you will now close the gap because, from the Enugu end, you see a lot of estates, already extending. They are going very far, leaving Enugu, before when you say, oh, I'm going to Ibagwanike. Ibagwanike is now inside the middle of Enugu because things are moving beyond. What will start happening is Nsukka will start expanding in the other direction too. And sooner or later, you will have almost a complete meeting and you start having satellite cities in between Nsukka and Enugu metropolis. And that's how, you expand metropolis, expand the megapolis, and then it's now more viable for somebody who wants to invest in railway. Because now you have people who actually say, I'm going to wake up in Nsukka and come to work at Independence layouts because it's safe, there are cities in between, there are a lot of roads and there's rail. So that's what seeding, putting power there does. It's like a seed that will generate so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, sir. And that's the much we can take on Eastern Business Report. The Afia Business Morning returns tomorrow. Many thanks for staying with us. My name is Cherry Ojukwu. Coming up next is Onyafia. Bye for now.